Your balance finally crossed six figures, $50,000. You refreshed the screen 3 times just to make sure it was real. You took a screenshot. You texted your best friend. You sat there for a moment feeling like you'd finally, after years of grinding and saying no to things, reached the other side of something. But then, 2 weeks passed. Then, a month. And the strangest thing started happening. You still felt anxious about money. You still hesitated before buying the slightly nicer groceries. You still woke up at 3 in the morning, doing mental math about whether you could actually afford to take that trip. The number in your account said 50,000, but your nervous system apparently did not get the memo. This is one of the most disorienting experiences in personal finance, and almost nobody warns you about it. We spend years chasing specific numbers, convinced that once we hit them, something fundamental will shift. 50,000 feels like a magic threshold. It's more than most Americans have saved. It's a year's salary for many people just sitting there as a cushion. It should feel like safety. It should feel like arrival. So why does it often feel like absolutely nothing? My name is Andy, and I spend way too much time thinking about the gap between financial reality and financial psychology. If you're someone who's been grinding toward a savings goal and wondering why hitting it didn't feel the way you expected, or if you're on your way to 50,000 and want to know what actually changes versus what your brain's lying to you about, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out, because today we're going to dissect the $50,000 illusion. We're going to look at what mathematically changes when you cross that threshold, what psychologically should change but often doesn't, and how to actually capture the benefits you've earned instead of letting your brain rob you of the peace you paid for with years of discipline. Here's the first thing you need to understand. Your brain isn't designed to feel wealthy. It's designed to feel threatened. This is not a flaw. This is a feature that kept your ancestors alive. The humans who relaxed when they had enough food, stored for winter, were the ones who got caught off guard by the unexpected drought. The humans who stayed slightly anxious, who kept gathering even when they had plenty, those are your great-great-great-grandparents. You inherited their nervous system, and that nervous system doesn't care that you have $50,000 in a high-yield savings account. It cares about threats. It scans for danger. It assumes that whatever you've got isn't quite enough, because historically, assuming you had enough was a great way to end up dead. This is called the negativity bias, and it's one of the most well-documented phenomena in psychology. Your brain gives roughly 3 times more weight to potential losses than to equivalent gains. So when you look at your $50,000, your logical brain sees safety. But your ancient threat detection system sees $50,000 that could disappear. It sees 50,000 reasons to stay vigilant. This is why hitting savings milestones rarely feels the way we expect. We think we're buying peace of mind, but what we're actually buying is optionality, and optionality is invisible. You can't feel the car repair you didn't have to put on a credit card. You can't feel the job you didn't have to keep because you had runway. You can't feel the negotiating power you now have. The benefits are real, but they exist in the negative space of things that didn't happen. Let me show you exactly what $50,000 actually changes, because the math is genuinely significant even if your emotions haven't caught up. The first thing that changes is your relationship to emergencies. The standard financial advice says you need 3 to 6 months of expenses saved as an emergency fund. For the median American household spending around $5,000 a month, that means $15,000 to $30,000. If you have $50,000, you have cleared that bar with room to spare. You now have roughly 10 months of runway if everything fell apart tomorrow. But here's what that actually means in practical terms. A $2,000 car repair is no longer a crisis. It is an inconvenience. A $5,000 medical bill is no longer a spiral into credit card debt. It is a withdrawal. Getting laid off is no longer an immediate panic. It is a 10-month runway to find something better, or to be strategic instead of desperate. The math on this is stark. When you do not have savings, a car repair costing $1,500 might go on a credit card at 22% interest. If you only pay minimums, you will spend years paying it off, and the total cost balloons to over $2,000. When you have $50,000 saved, you pay cash. The cost is exactly $1,500, and you move on with your life. That spread, the difference between what emergencies cost you when you have savings versus when you do not, is what I call the security dividend, and it compounds invisibly every time something goes wrong. Over a lifetime, having adequate savings probably saves you tens of thousands of dollars in interest, late fees, and desperation premiums. You just never see a line item for money you did not waste. The second thing that changes is your negotiating position, and this is the one almost nobody talks about. When you have $50,000 in the bank, you can say no. You can say no to the job offer that is lowballing you because you do not need to eat next month. You can say no to the landlord who wants to raise your rent 30% because you have the cushion to move. You can say no to the predatory lending offer because you have alternatives. This is called having a BATNA in negotiation theory. Best alternative to negotiated agreement. Your BATNA when you have zero savings is desperation. Your BATNA when you have $50,000 is walking away. And the research is unambiguous. People with strong alternatives negotiate better outcomes across every domain: salary, rent, interest rates, everything. Let me put a number on this. Studies on salary negotiation show that candidates who negotiate and actually have the leverage to walk away earn on average 5 to 10% more than those who take the first offer on a $60,000 salary that is $3,000 to $6,000 per year. Over a decade, that single negotiation powered by the confidence of having savings could be worth $50,000 to $60,000 in additional lifetime earnings. Your savings made you money by existing, but you will never see that line item either. The third thing that changes is your insurance math. This is technical but important. When you have no savings, you need low-deductible insurance plans because you cannot afford to pay $2,000 out of pocket if something happens. Low-deductible plans have higher monthly premiums. You are paying extra every month for the privilege of not having savings. When you have $50,000, you can switch to high-deductible plans. Your monthly premium drops significantly, often by $200 to $400 per month. Yes, you might have to pay that $2,000 deductible someday, but you have the cash to cover it, and in the meantime, you are saving $2,000 to $4,000 per year in premiums. This applies to health insurance, car insurance, and renters or homeowners insurance. Across all categories, having savings allows you to self-insure against small risks and only pay premiums for a catastrophic coverage. The annual savings can easily reach $3,000 to $5,000. That is a real, measurable mathematical benefit of having $50,000 in the bank. But your brain does not feel $300 not leaving your account each month. It only feels the $50,000 sitting there, taunting you with its immobility. So let us talk about why the psychological shift does not match the mathematical shift, because this is where most people get stuck. There is a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation that researchers have been studying since the 1970s. The basic finding is that humans adapt to both positive and negative changes in circumstances, eventually returning to a relatively stable baseline level of happiness. Win the lottery, you will be thrilled for a while, then return to baseline. Lose a limb, you will be devastated for a while, then return to surprisingly close to that same baseline. Your savings account is subject to the same adaptation. When you first started saving and crossed $10,000, it probably felt incredible. When you hit $25,000, you felt momentum. But now that you have reached $50,000, your brain has already adapted. $50,000 is not a windfall anymore. It is just your new normal. And your threat detection system, the one that kept your ancestors alive, has already updated its expectations. This is what I call the moving baseline problem. Whatever you have becomes the floor. And the floor does not feel like an achievement. It feels like the minimum. Your brain is not comparing your $50,000 to the zero you started with. It is comparing your $50,000 to the $100,000 it now thinks you need to feel safe. This is why you still feel anxious. This is why the milestone did not deliver the peace you expected. The goalposts moved the moment you arrived. And here is the uncomfortable truth that the financial industry does not want you to hear. This never fully goes away. There are people with $10 million in the bank who still feel financially anxious, not because they are irrational, but because they are human. Their brains adapted to 10 million and now scan for threats at that level. What if there is a market crash? What if there is a lawsuit? What if their kids need something? The anxiety is a feature, not a bug, and no amount of money fully eliminates it because the anxiety was never really about the money in the first place. So what actually changes at 50,000 and what does not? What changes is your mathematical risk profile. You are genuinely more resilient than you were before. You have runway. You have options. You have negotiating power. You have the ability to self-insure. These are real, valuable, measurable benefits. What does not change, at least not automatically, is your felt sense of security, your emotional relationship to money, your baseline anxiety level. These are psychological variables, and they operate on different rules than your bank balance. This is the $50,000 illusion. We think the number will change how we feel, but feelings are not downstream of numbers. Feelings are downstream of interpretations, habits, and neural patterns that took decades to form. The question then becomes, how do you actually capture the psychological benefits of what you have built? Here is the first strategy. You have to practice conscious comparison. Your brain's default is to compare your current situation to your aspirational situation. 50,000 versus the 100,000 you think you need. This comparison will always produce anxiety because you are measuring yourself against an imaginary future. The antidote is deliberate downward comparison. Regularly remind yourself where you were. Look at old bank statements. Remember when you had $800 to your name and a credit card bill that kept you up at night? The distance between there and here is your actual achievement. It is real. It matters. And your brain will not acknowledge it unless you force the comparison. Some people do this weekly as a practice. Every Sunday, they look at their net worth and explicitly compare it to 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This reframes the current number as progress rather than as a floor. The second strategy is to operationalize your security. Right now, your $50,000 is an abstract number. It does not feel like safety because safety is a feeling, not a number. You need to translate the number into concrete capabilities. Sit down and actually calculate what your $50,000 buys you. How many months of expenses is that? Write it down. 10 months. What specific emergencies can you now handle without debt? Car repairs up to $5,000. Medical bills up to $10,000. Job loss for almost a year. Write those down. Make the abstract concrete. Then, when anxiety hits at 3 in the morning, you have specific answers. You can tell yourself that you have 10 months of runway. You can handle a $5,000 emergency. Your brain responds better to specific capabilities than to abstract account balances. The third strategy is perhaps the most counterintuitive. You have to give yourself permission to spend. I know that sounds backwards. You saved $50,000 by being disciplined about spending. But part of why you do not feel the benefit of your savings is that you are still operating in scarcity mode. You are still saying no to the small things that would actually improve your quality of life. The point of saving money is eventually to use it, either directly or through the security it provides. If you have $50,000 and you still will not buy the slightly nicer groceries or take the occasional trip, you are paying the psychological cost of deprivation without getting the mathematical benefit of savings. You have the worst of both worlds. Set a specific, monthly discretionary budget that you commit to spending, not saving. Spending on things that genuinely improve your life. This retrains your brain to understand that the savings are working for you. They are providing an upgraded life, not just a number on a screen that you guard anxiously. The fourth strategy is to stop checking. Obsessive monitoring of your accounts does not make you wealthier. It makes you more anxious. Every time you check and see the same number, your brain registers stagnation. Every time the number ticks down slightly due to a normal expense, your brain registers loss. Wealthy people, people who actually feel secure, do not check their accounts constantly. They set up systems, automatic contributions, automatic bill pay, automatic investments, and then they let the systems run. They check quarterly or monthly. They evaluate trends, not daily fluctuations. If you are checking your savings account more than once a week, you are not being responsible. Are feeding your anxiety. Reduce the frequency. Trust your systems. Let the money work without your constant surveillance. Now, let me be clear about something. Nothing I am saying implies that $50,000 is the finish line. It is not. It is a significant milestone, but the math of financial independence requires considerably more. At a 4% safe withdrawal rate, $50,000 generates only $2,000 per year in sustainable passive income. That is not enough to quit your job. It is not even close. The point is not that you have arrived. The point is that you have built something real and you deserve to actually experience the benefit of what you built instead of perpetually deferring your own peace of mind to the next milestone. Because here is what I have observed. The people who cannot feel 50,000 will not feel 100,000 either. They will not feel 250,000. They will reach financial independence with $1 million in the bank and still feel anxious because they never learned how to update their emotional operating system. They won the game, but forgot to feel the win. The work of feeling secure is not the same as the work of becoming secure. One is mathematical, the other is psychological. And most people only focus on the math. Let me tell you what I have learned from studying people who actually feel wealthy, regardless of what they have. They share certain characteristics that have nothing to do with account balances. First, they have internalized a specific ratio. They focus on months of runway rather than dollar amounts. Someone with $50,000 and $5,000 monthly expenses has 10 months of runway. Someone with $50,000 and $3,000 monthly expenses has almost 17 months. The person with lower expenses feels wealthier at the same account balance because they measure security in time, not in dollars. Second, they define enough explicitly. They have a specific number that represents genuine sufficiency for their lives, and they know what that number is. Most people have a vague sense that more is better without ever defining what enough actually looks like. This guarantees permanent dissatisfaction because you are chasing a target that does not exist. Third, they practice gratitude deliberately, not as a platitude, but as a cognitive intervention. Research shows that people who regularly acknowledge what they have experience lower financial anxiety than those who focus on what they lack, even controlling for actual wealth levels. Your brain's default is to scan for gaps and threats. Gratitude is the manual override. Fourth, they understand the role of comparison. They know that feeling wealthy is a relative phenomenon, and they consciously manage their reference points. They do not follow influencers flashing rented Lamborghinis. They do not obsess over what their college roommate is earning. They compare themselves to their own past selves and to people with less, not more. The $50,000 illusion is ultimately a lesson about the disconnect between external achievement and internal experience. We assume that changing our circumstances will change how we feel, but psychology does not work that way. How we feel is determined by how we interpret our circumstances, and interpretation is a skill that must be developed deliberately. You have $50,000. That is real. It is meaningful. It changes your mathematical risk profile in significant ways. Capturing the emotional benefit requires a second kind of work, the work of updating your internal story, managing your reference points, and teaching your ancient brain that it is okay to feel safe. No one is going to do that work for you. The financial industry certainly will not. They profit when you feel perpetually behind. They profit when you believe the next product or the next milestone will finally deliver the peace you seek. They have no incentive to tell you that you already have enough to feel differently about your life. You have to give yourself permission to feel what you have earned. You have to actively resist the moving baseline. You have to practice the cognitive skills of security, rather than waiting for security to arrive through accumulation alone. Because here is the truth that took me too long to learn. Wealth is not a number. Wealth is a relationship to money. And that relationship can be healthy or unhealthy at any account balance. I know people with $5 million who are financially miserable. I know people with $50,000 who have genuine peace. The difference is not the math. The difference is the mindset. You did something hard. You saved $50,000 in an economy designed to extract every dollar from you before it can accumulate. You said no when everyone around you was saying yes. You delayed gratification for years to build something real. Now, do the harder thing. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself experience the security you paid for. Stop deferring your own peace to the next milestone that will also fail to satisfy the hedonic treadmill. The $50,000 illusion is not that the money does not matter. It does. The illusion is that the money alone will make you feel secure. It will not. The money provides the foundation. You have to build the feeling yourself. If this video helped you see your savings differently, share it with someone who just hit a milestone and is wondering why it does not feel the way they expected. We need to talk about this more. We talk endlessly about how to accumulate wealth and almost never about how to actually feel wealthy with what we have. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.